So just if I can just get you to wait for the red line and then start.
Good evening and welcome to everyone, councillors, the press and the public who have joined us for this extraordinary meeting of the full council. This meeting will be held under the regulations allowing local authorities to meet formally using remote technology. Please bear with us whilst I set out how this meeting will be conducted. The Town Council is using the Microsoft Office Live Events platform to hold this meeting. Our standing orders have been updated to allow this to happen by the adoption of a remote meetings protocol and procedure rules. This meeting is being streamed live and is available to view on our website. It is very important for everyone participating in this meeting to switch off all mobile devices to silent and for the duration of this meeting. It is also important that you keep your microphones on mute using the toolbar on your screen when you are not speaking to reduce reduction and background noise. At the start of the meeting, the Town Clerk will ensure that those members and officers required for this meeting are present by calling a register and asking to each confirm that they are present. Throughout the meeting, councillors should have the chat window open, as this will enable you to indicate when you wish to speak or have to leave the meeting. It is important that you can see this window, as it is the mechanism that will be used to monitor participation throughout the meeting. The Town Clerk or Assistant Town Clerk may prompt me if there are any questions or statements from members that are outstanding. When your name is called, you will need to unmute your microphone using the toolbar on your screen and wait for the word live and the red line to appear around your screen. And then please ensure that you speak clearly. This meeting is devoted to one matter, and because the second half of this meeting is confidential, the live streaming of this meeting will stop as soon as the post-presentation question and answer session has finished. Members will then reconvene in a private session to consider the exempt report. Discussion in this first part of the meeting will therefore be confined to the design concept presentation. Members will have the opportunity for a more detailed discussion in the exempt second part of the meeting. If at any time the Town Council's technology fails and we need to adjourn the meeting for a short period, I will confirm this and ask all those who are present to turn their cameras and mute their microphones while the problem is rectified. I will then confirm when the meeting resumes. We can only monitor our technology and cannot halt a meeting if a member of public or press experiences technology issues. I will now ask the Town Clerk to carry out a roll call of councillors and ask you to confirm that you are present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Starting at the alphabetical order, I'm aware of apologies from councillors Baker and Blanchard Cooper. So, Councillor Buckland.
Here.
Councillor Chase.
Present.
Councillor Long.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Malloy.
Present.
Councillor Northeast.
Yep, present.
Councillor Price.
Present.
Councillor Rhodes.
Present.
Councillor Seeks. No. Councillor Tandy.
Present.
Councillor Turner.
Present.
And
Yeah, that wasn't me.
And Councillor Dr. Walsh. Who I can see, but has not got his microphone on.
Present, and it wasn't me.
Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Peter. Members are reminded to switch their mobile devices to silent for the duration of this meeting, please. Town Clerk has already stated the apologies for this meeting. Moving on to the next item, declarations of interest. The standing declarations are noted. Members and officers are reminded to make any other declarations if they become apparent at the appropriate time during the meeting. Are there any further declarations? No. Great. Item number 4 on the agenda, public forum. There are no questions, Peter?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent, thank you. Urgent items, there are no urgent items. Public forum. In accordance with the remote meetings protocol, which has been introduced by the Town Council, any members of the public wishing to address the Council or any of its committees during the remote meetings should have emailed their submission to us one clear day before the meeting.
No questions.
And there are no questions from the public. Moving on to the next item, 6 on the agenda, the Keystone Centre project. I shall now introduce Tom Davis and Tom Wild from Hellier Davis Architects to report to us on the feasibility study they have done. And now I hand over to Thomas and Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's kind. Let me just introduce myself and Tom. I'm Tom Davis from Hellier Davis Architects. We're an architectural practice of 10 people based on the south coast of Emsworth, so local to Littlehampton. Tom works for me, and both of us have been from the outset engaged with Juliet and her team to bring a concept design for the Keystone Centre together, and we've done this through various presentations. And we've developed it all the way through. So we sort of did a bit of a design, then presented it, then it did a bit more, and so on. So today is sort of the conclusion of where we've got to with that and how we've developed it. So if it's all right with everybody, Tom and myself would like to present that, and then I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. Can I ask how we are presenting it? Shall I share screen, or is someone going to put the document up?
Can the councillors turn the cameras off, please?
Can you share your screen, please, with the presentation?
Yeah, Tom, do you want to do that, please?
Yes, do that.
Yes, it's there now.
That there? Can everybody see?
That should be on the screen, yes.
Yes, it's there.
Full screen. There we go. Okay. So as Tom's introduced, we prepared the concept design for a new Keystone, or the new Keystone Centre in Littlehampton, and this presentation is split into 4 parts, of which the first part we'd introduced the brief, and we've explored some initial findings to which we carried out site analysis, which has helped lead and allow us to develop the design of the new concept. This initial sheet shows the summary of the brief, which was set out by Littlehampton to propose a multi-youth facility for aiming to provide access for training and employment opportunities for young people in the local community. And the site is located, as you can see in the images, to the right-hand side. The existing Keystone Centre is located to the north of the proposed site, which is adjacent to industrial units, which I'll show you later, and to the east would be residential area. This new proposed building, our whole concept is based on it being flexible and this multifunctional spaces which can protect the long-term future of the building. We want it to inspire the local community and a place where the community take ownership of this building to help provide these educational opportunities, but also celebrate the local achievements that the community achieve. We started the project by looking at the existing building, which is the Keystone Centre, located on Eldon Way. And we've identified 3 key areas which perhaps start as a starting point for how we could provide a setting and a new facility which improves and provides this new facility for the local community. The first point is how the building can address the open spaces that it surrounds. At the moment, the existing concrete prefabricated building is it may serve as a building that itself can operate and provide these facilities, but it doesn't address the open spaces around which it could be better used. There isn't necessarily a sense of arrival or entrance. Those that are new to the area, it could potentially be a quite daunting place to arrive. And the third point was the connection to the outdoor provisions. At the moment, there's the kind of hard surface area to the back of the site, behind the existing building, and it's understanding how that could be better related to both the road, Eldon Way, and how the building can relate to that too. So looking at the proposed site to the south, we started by looking at movement around the site and how people would access. Primarily, we kind of feel that the local community, we hope, would like to walk to the new which, however, we've identified that there are a number of areas where there potentially isn't any safe crossing points, which may need further thought. And whilst there's also vehicle access via Clun Road and Eldon Way. The main principal access onto the site is from the north of Eldon Way, and then there's the BMX track to the south, where the blue arrow to the south of the site shows how the building doesn't necessarily have to respond just to Eldon Way. It should respond also to the other facilities in the area, such as the BMX track. This slide looks at how the climate and key views could influence how the building is situated on the site. The site is fairly orientated to the south, so there's opportunity for sustainable design. The industrial estate located to the west offers protection from prevailing winds, and there's plenty of vegetation there as well, which offers screening. The key views accessing the site, primarily people will be accessing from Clun Road, so the key view number 1. And as people approach the site, the building should form a beacon, something that people know where they're moving to. At the moment, the existing building located to the north of the proposed site, it's very low, it can't really be seen. It doesn't necessarily have a presence in the area, so it's something which we'll look at a little bit later. And this final slide on the initial findings shows the potential impact to the surrounding area. As I briefly mentioned, so to the east, the primarily residential area, so the potential there's a potential high impact of sound from people using the site, and also from a visual impact as well. To the north, the Eldon Way acts as a natural barrier, so there's less of an impact, despite there being other residential properties in the area. But the road forms this sort of barrier, and to the west, you've got the industrial units, which, because there's no habitable accommodation, there's less of an impact there as well. So that kind of concludes the initial findings of the site, looking at the site analysis. And this next part looks at just an initial concept for the scheme and builds upon the site analysis that we carried out. We'd like to start by just showing a collection of images and keywords which we'll build upon, showing how this building, the architectural form needs to be inspiring. They should bring energy to the area, which is uplifting and exciting, because it's the youth primarily the focus here. We want them to be excited and want to use this space, and that can be achieved through the architectural form of the building. And again, we can be playful through the use of colour. And I think most importantly, we want the building to be celebrated, and use colour to help and emphasise that. Then taking that inside, the building should be flexible to adapt to future use. As the building is used by the community, we want them to be able to take ownership of it. The spaces which are open allow the community to use it. So in 10, 15, 20 years time, when different people occupy these spaces, they may use it for a completely different reason. So it could be through temporary furniture, but at the same time, we want pockets that people can kind of gravitate towards and occupy themselves and take ownership of that building. And by taking colour into the building from the outside and taking it inside, it relates the two. So this building that's flexible and comfortable for the youth. So we start by building upon the initial site findings that we carried out, looking at how we could orientate the building to make sure that it minimises the impact to the local residents on the east, but takes advantage and make sure we build upon the key issues that we noticed with the existing building. So we've started by locating the building on the east side so that the building in itself forms a barrier to any play provision which is located then on the west. And in doing this, the building then acts as a screen to help mitigate any noise impact for those residents that would be immediately on the boundary on Clun Road. The building then located sort of set back from the road but stretching across the site allows us to form the new principal access onto the site, which then the building can then respond to the front and to the green space behind. From these bubble diagrams, we've then taken the building and the concept into a 3D form. And we started by having two masses that collide. So the purple that you can see on the screen is adjacent to the residential dwellings. And in order to mitigate any visual impact, we've kept this single story. And then the unit that interjects with that addresses the road of Eldon Way and the green space behind and to the south would be two-story. We've then rotated the two-story element to take advantage of the solar gain. You can see from the diagram on the right that the blue diagram isn't, or the blue blob isn't quite perfectly south, but by orientating it and turning it slightly, we can make better use of the solar gain to the south. We've then manipulated the two-story element in the third diagram to form a new entrance and start to introduce openings. And this then builds upon the point made of the existing building is the sense of arrival and entrance to a building is critical. It welcomes people in, it makes them feel comfortable, and it starts to create pockets of spaces that people can occupy. Then building upon this further, number 4 looks at how when we rotate the two-story element round to take advantage of the solar gain, we actually create potentially an overlooking issue where people could be occupying first floor areas and overlook residents to the east. But by rotating that two-story element slightly back on itself, the building then looks further towards where the existing Keystone Centre is on Eldon Way. And then the diagram 5 shows how we can then introduce architectural forms to make this building exciting, form a beacon for the local area. And this is done through roof forms and overhangs to an entrance. And then we can then build upon that further in diagram 6, where we add detail. So this is where we may add colour to window surrounds. We may have walls that project out into the surrounding area. And this then ties the building into its surroundings and how it relates. So the building then opens out into these green spaces surrounding it. So this then summarises the concept that we built upon of how the building is situated on the east side. Whilst it's closest to residents, it forms a screen and a barrier to the play provision, which is actually then located on the west. And this then helps mitigate sound noise as the building primarily opens out into the spaces where they've got the existing mound in number 4 on here. It helps to mitigate any potential impact, whilst it still provides this this building which is primarily accessed from Eldon Way, and there's a new path and landscaping which leads you to an entrance, and it's very, very obvious where you're going to in the destination of your arrival. From this initial concept, we've then developed a few initial 3D perspectives to show how this building forms a beacon for the local community. The initial image at the top here shows how you approach from Eldon Way. The single story element is quite low, so you don't necessarily see it, but you see this visual for architectural form and an introduction of colour, which acts as a beacon through the roof form. And then below that, you see the perspective looking back from the industrial estate, which is more open. As people arrive from along Eldon Way from the industrial estate, the building acts as a gateway to the community. And this then helps celebrate the achievements and the activities that are going on. It makes the building feel welcoming, and people are more likely then to use it. On the right hand side, you can start to see an introduction of the material palette of how there may be anti-graffiti materials that are used, but these just give you an idea of different options that potentially could be used, and this was early on in the stage of our concept. And the final image shows how the building would address Eldon Way. You have the single story element to the left hand side, and then the 2-story element which then addresses Eldon Way, acting as this beacon and the introduction of colour around window openings. We then, once we developed this initial concept, we presented it to, or we had informal conversations with our district council planning officers, and there was key areas and points of discussion that they raised, which we'll build upon later, that Tom will discuss in further slides. But particularly understanding how we can address the loss of public open space, because the existing site is public open space. They do feel that the development would benefit the local residents and the community. And whilst the design and materials don't necessarily reflect the buildings in the local area, the low profile and keeping, especially with this single story element to the adjacent to residents, helps to mitigate any potential visual impact. So we'll now to part 3, which we've then built upon this concept and refined it further, and I will pass over to Tom to discuss this further.
Thanks, Tom. Here we are. We've developed it from the concept design there, and just incorporating the planner's comments. And we're showing a bit more form every time we develop the design. So here we have some roof pitches, some roof lights, but also we have more detail in terms of parking numbers, proper orientation, what happens around this building. So I'll just run through that. Number 1, we've introduced a zebra crossing, pedestrian crossing at the top of the site there. And this is just obviously so that a building for the youth can access the site safely, but also we want to have this continuation path that runs from the front of the site to the rear, which Tom touched upon, to connect the front and rear, and obviously that BMX area to the rear. We've got the playground, which we've kept in the front there. It's moved over to the side. Number 3 is parking. So from the informal information advice we got from Aaron, District Council, they actually wanted quite a lot of parking to fall in line with their leisure facilities guidance. and the parking they actually wanted was 19.5 spaces, or 20 if you like. The issue here is that if we put 20 spaces in, the building gets pushed so far back into the site that actually we just end up with a car park, and the words that Tom's previously mentioned about entrance and beacon are lost. And also our thoughts are that this building is for the youth, and it's not a leisure centre where everyone's driving to it. Where it should just be used for its design. So actually what we've proposed is 14 spaces in total in the site, and then 2 of those are disabled. Currently there is parking on the street, so for the current playground there is parking. People just seem to just attend to park on the street. Now, whether that's acceptable as an actual proposal, I don't know, but it is a current situation. But for our proposal now and for the concept design going forward, we are proposing 14 spaces on the site. We mentioned having this buffer between the residential on Clun Road and the building, and that creates this gap here, which is number 4. But actually, the parks officer, from their feedback, actually made a really good comment that actually to maintain the areas to the rear, they need access through. And so our thought was actually, well, let's use this area here so that maintenance and solely maintenance can get around the back of the site and into that grass area. This mitigates using any other area, any other pedestrian route to get vehicles through, so it's quite a safe way to do it. The mound that's on the site at the moment has just been moved, and not just with our building, but actually we think that what we don't want to do is just plonk a building in the middle of a nice piece of green land and walk away. There's actually a whole conceptual thing here, so you can see a lot of the sight lines match, the playground, some of the angles that we're using, because we want to create paths, we want to create views, we want to create a sense of entrance, and everything has to tie in from the car parking to the mound to the playground. The revised mound, although it doesn't sound terribly exciting, will be part of the scheme, and we like that. And it's the same for number 6. So out the back of the hall there, which I'll come onto the plan, there'll be an outside performance area where the hall can sort of spill out, and there can be performances, but there's an area of sort of hard standing there which can be landscaped, so that addresses that rear area, and then there's that continued path just to connect the land to the BMX track and not sort of desert it. Tom, the next slide, please. So moving on to a bit more detail, at this stage we start to look at the plans, and obviously there's numbers dotted around, so I'll go through that. Number 1 is the path, and it's the keywords that we're using of sense of entrance and beacon and so on. So as you're walking along the path, that the building is there, and the entrance is a real capture. So there's no mistake where that front door is and where you have to go. Number 2 is the play area, and number 3 is parking. Number 4, there's an area outside the sort of front entrance, which has got cycle storage. And the areas highlighted in yellow are sort of breakout areas or seating areas just for people to sort of sit and relax and socialise. So that's an area out the front there. Then we've got this sort of grand entrance, which is 5, and a sense of space. So as we walk into that, that's a vaulted area above as well. So there's a double height element as soon as you walk in. There's also a connection with the rear as well. So at the rear of that, Tom, can you just, on your cursor, can you just highlight the window at the rear where we go through? So there. So from 5, where you walk in, there's a window at the rear there, so you get an immediate connection, not just with the building, but actually with the space to the rear, which we see as very important for obviously the use of land. There's obviously security things that the more we can see through, the more we can protect the rear. So number 6 is the entrance lobby. The toilet provision, we actually presented this, and one of the comments was we didn't have enough toilets, so we've actually increased the amount of toilets in these areas. So there's male and female toilets there. Whether that's the final configuration, not quite sure, but that area is certainly designated for that. We've got 9 as the staff office, and again, this is key in the orientation. So this is a clever little space that can sort of see everything that's going on in and around the building. So it captures the entrance, it will capture the 2-storey element, and it will capture, the areas of landscaping at the front and the rear. Number 10 is the kitchen. So this can serve the hall. And it can sort of act as a canteen to the entrance lobby as well. And number 11 is that's at the top there. That's a double height, a vaulted space. So the hall has a flat ceiling, if you like, but at that area there it's vaulted to follow the roof pitch. That gives an idea that you can have a stage or a performance area. And you won't be, head height won't be an issue, and things like lighting and so on. In this room, some of the comments that we picked up on are how space can sort of be divided into lots of little spaces, and how it can be used and adapted. So in the room, there's lots of sort of hidden dividers, which are sort of cleverly open out. So they open out and then they create a breakout space with that. And equally, you can have them all hidden away and you have a completely flush hall with plenty of storage, which is the areas shown in pink. 13 is the outside space. And again, that's the performance area. So you can see the hall there. So if there was a performance or anything, that area at the rear there can be used. And then 14 is the maintenance route. So that would come around the side there. And obviously with the gates, there's no access to public through that. So that's quite a good closed off space, because we couldn't have the building right up against the boundary, because obviously that does have an impact. So we have to bring it away. And then when you bring it away from the boundary, obviously that creates issues with what do you do with the gap. So we've actually used that to our advantage and created a route for maintenance. That's the downstairs plan. We'll just move on to the first floor. And in the top right there, I know it's very small, but we have the downstairs plan just for reference, and maybe the questions later, I'm probably happy to flip between the two. So coming upstairs, number 1 is the void. So that's the area that you can look downstairs, and then there's the window at the rear again. So that's a double height window. So the amount of light and space that you'll get from that will be very rewarding. You have 2, which is a landing, and there's another breakout space there. You have Juliet balconies on 3, which is not an area you can go out on, but just an area where doors can open up, and I can obviously look over the front of the site. So on a hot day, that up in the area of number 2, that would be great. Number 4 is toilets again. So obviously there's a lift in this building. Sorry, I should have mentioned that, which is the grey next to number 4 on the right of number 4, and that obviously goes down to the ground floor. So there's provision for toilets on first and ground floor. And then we have a small meeting room, number 5. And then we have a multifunctional space, which is 6, which is obviously a large room with storage, breakout space, and with a bit more detail, this could be divided, or however the space is used. So from here, we started to one of the comments from the planners was that to look at local materials, and obviously they saw our previous concept, which obviously had a lot of black, which was just to generate conversation and thought. So what we've actually done, we've actually got materials from the sort of surrounding areas, but actually made them modern, put a modern twist in it, and tried to make them fit within our building. So although the palette is similar of brick, it's actually how we use it. So We've got things like a long format facing brick, which goes around the ground floor. We've got some glazed bricks, which is the window and door reveals to form a sense of entrance. And then to the first floor, where we feel that there's obviously a line between ground and first floor, and what needs to be vandal resistant. We don't want anything too delicate on the ground floor, because we feel that it's just going to get potentially vandalised. So we need to be quite robust on the ground floor. And as we go up to the first floor, we're proposing a zinc wrap that goes around the building, and then that's also picked up on the first floor, on the single story roof. And then the actual colour of the zinc is up for discussion, but we like the image attached, which is sort of a brown rusty colour, in that reflects the surroundings a bit more than a harsh black. But and also just to mention the colours that we're using for the window and door reveals. We've just picked yellow on this, and actually I'd like there to be a bit more of a narrative of a certain colour, and why we've chosen that colour for the community. But just for today's exercise, yellow is shown there, but that again can be adapted. So these are the views that similar views that Tom showed earlier, but we have a building now, and we have car parking, and you can see that the building is slightly further back because of the parking, but it does have the beacon. There is a path there. It's quite clear from the amount of glazing just in that area, and the yellow-orange brick of where you're going. From a height point of view, you have the single-story element, which is the main hall. And then you also have the two-story bit, which is has the rooms above. The houses on Clun Road are two-story plus a pitch, whereas ours, we're two-story, but we don't really have much roof on top of our first floor. So actually, we're not towering over the houses. In fact, we're quite reserved. And this building will fit very well in the context. Obviously, you can see the buildings of Clun Road there and their roofs. So we purposely kept it low to stop any conflict there. So this is the view from the rear. And you can see the zinc form going around. You can also see the two-story glazed element, which connects the front and the rear of the building. And at this stage, we're keen, obviously as a practice, but also as a design principle, to obviously engage as much sustainability as we can. And there's also obviously with a community building, it's good to sort of seen to be green. And the idea of putting sort of solar in the zinc, we're quite keen on. So there's an image on the left there, which has the zinc profile, zinc upstand, and in between you put the solar panels. So actually on this building here, although shown on our 3D, the scope of putting solar around it is very, very high. And obviously the orientation of this building has been designed for that. So we're very keen to get as much renewable energy on it. We're also keen to make this the most efficient building we can, from going in and above current building regulations. So the insulation we can really increase from a community building, and something we've obviously engaged a lot of power, electricity, and heat. The best thing we can do is make it as efficient as possible through insulation and clever use of ventilation and light. So as the design develops, it would be great to look at that. This is the view from the front. So similar. So you can see the solar panels, which is the shading on there. You can see the car park spaces. You can also see the entrance, which it really does guide you in that entrance, especially with the seating outside. So there's an element of community out there. The building has this first floor zinc effect, which is shown there. And again, just to sort of reiterate the relationship with Clun Road there, you can see the houses. You can see that we've come away the single-storey element, the two-storey element, but the highest point of the two-storey element really is in the middle of the site, if not over towards the industrial side. So, you know, we have been very, very mindful of Clun Road all the way through this design, just to make sure that we don't want to overtower them, and we certainly don't want to overlook them. So we've been very mindful of that. Next one, Tom.
That actually concludes the.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great.
Yes.
So that concludes it. I don't know what the protocol is now. Obviously, me and Tom are happy to field any questions regarding the presentation.
Well, Thomas and Tom, I'd like to thank you very, very much for your very informative presentation. Really impressed with it, and I totally agree with you on the parking. I am going to open up to questions in a minute, but before opening the meeting to questions, can I remind members to keep their questions to matters that relate to what they have seen in this presentation and the design concept, and to reserve all other questions for the more detailed discussion about the way forward in the exempt part of this meeting. Sorry. Also, do make sure that you have the chat window open, as this will enable you to indicate that you wish to speak. The town clerk or assistant clerk may prompt me if there are any questions or statements from members that are outstanding. At all times, please ensure that you speak clearly and wait for the word live and red line to appear around your screen before speaking. And please make sure you address all questions to me as Mayor, and I will ask the architects or officers to respond. We can now start with questions and answers.
Councillor Dr. Walsh, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dr. Walsh, please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I've the benefit of seeing this for the second time, so I thank Tom and Tom for actually presenting it again.
Sorry, James, can I ask you to stick your camera on, please?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was asked to turn it off. Right, my camera is on. Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, for showing this to us. It's very exciting. I'm very much taken by it. I like the way you've listened to all the earlier comments and taken them on board, and really listened to the consultation that took place with stakeholders and others a year or so ago. Can I ask a question about the environmental side of it? Thank you for the solar panels, that's great. Thank you for the insulation. Is there any provision for a ground source heat pump as the heating elements of this particular building?
If it's okay to answer, I mean, at the moment, anything's up for grabs really. As the design develops and to the later stages, there needs to be some consultation with an NME consultant just to work out actually what is viable from a cost point of view. Because what we've tried to do at this stage is trying to design sustainability into the building. And we can do that obviously with orientation and so on. Something like a ground source heat pump, which, you know, the installation cost is huge, and obviously it's not seen. It's sort of a separate conversation with an M&E consultant whether it's viable for this building.
Okay.
You know, we'd like to look at everything, and we'd love to put every little bit of sustainability in we can, but it has to be viable, and it's usually around cost and return. And ground source heat pump, unfortunately, the installation costs are currently quite large on it. So it's a question that needs to be developed. But I think, you know, sustainability is on it's on everyone's radar, of course. But as an architect's practice and as a building that we're designing, we're obviously very keen to introduce as much as we can.
Thank you very much indeed. But it could, I shouldn't have said just ground source, it could have been air source as well, but the comments apply to that as well, I understand. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I'm very excited and I hope it goes ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Walsh. I next have Councillor Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Thomas, I missed the sort of like the ground floor layout. My issue is the case of, can you confirm to me the situation with disabled toilets, and are they singular or are you combining them? That would be my main concern. I noticed the ones upstairs, and I'm very grateful for the fact that you've thought along the lines of putting a lift in. But it's one of my concerns is obviously the facilities for disabled persons, and that normally they have to have a toilet facility to their own because of the needs that they must have. So if that's a possibility, please. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Buckland. So currently our provision is shown on the ground floor here, numbers 7 and 8. There is a disabled toilet, a sole disabled toilet above the number 8. I don't know if that can be seen, but it's there. So there is that provision there, and you obviously touched upon the lift. Just regarding toilets and layout and how they are categorised at this stage. We're developing this all the time, and when we initially came up with this ground floor plan, we had a lot less toilet than this. So actually one of our initial feedbacks was to put more toilets in. So we have added more. It's not actually the amount of toilets you require for a building like this, and obviously the disabled element is building regulation and current regulations obviously state that you need a disabled toilet and you need certain stuff, but they don't touch upon amounts. And so we're really gauging on sort of previous buildings that we've done, and then previous buildings that you've all been involved in, and how they can be adapted to sort of find out how many toilets are acceptable, and so obviously the disabled element is part of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buckland. I now have Councillor Malloy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I start by saying this is a really lovely building and will make the area look so much nicer. I completely agree with the parking. I think we should be encouraging people to walk or cycle, and I think with the age of the children it's going to be more of a drop off and pick up than a parent staying with them anyway. When you spoke about colours and you said these are only colours that you've put in just to see, like show us the design, we had a meeting not so long ago about the town centre regeneration. There was a lot of talk of colours, and they were talking of putting accent colours in to tie the town in together. Would it be worth looking at tying the colours of your building in with the accent colours of the town centre? And on top of that, the rust idea on top would tie it in with the cafe we've got on the seafront for the look, or would it be a completely separate thing and you not tie it in with how the town looks?
The answer, I don't know. I think one of the things I'm really keen on is for the youth to take this building on take the building on, and it would be great if that colour or that scheme could come from them, just so that it feels a bit more theirs rather than coming from above, if you like. If there could be any sort of incentive that that or even it doesn't have to be in a mural or anything like that could sort of really enhance it and just give them a little bit more ownership. So I'm sitting on the fence a little bit, as you can probably hear, but it's I think if the youth could take it on a bit more as a colour, I think that would be my preference. But yeah, we'll see how it develops.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I'm sure Councillor Tandy will be able to interject about colour later. I'll now move on to Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 comments. One is I quite agree with Councillor Malloy about the colour scheme and getting the youth of the area, and perhaps utilising the Arran Youth Project to encourage them with perhaps a prize for entering the competition to choose the colour scheme. It might be a route to go. The other thing I'd like to say, there was a mention about possible vandalism, which of course we all know happens. So I'd like to see something like an autograph wall, so that all the kids that utilise this space are actually able to sign a wall with their name and their date, so that could live on for 20 years or the lifespan of the building. So perhaps an autograph wall would be a route for that to happen, and that might alleviate and reduce some of the possibility of any vandalism where they do scribble their name somewhere. My other point I'd like to ask about is the fence along the east side against the residential area on Clune Road. Are you planning on a particular type of fence? Is there going to be hedging or trees to alleviate some of and make some screening there to soundproof and just screen it all from the residential area? That's my 3 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you. The autograph wall is an interesting one. I don't know if you can flick to one of your earlier images, Tom, where we had an idea of a graffiti wall, which is a similar concept where we had a wall projecting out. We'll just find it for you there. So there's a wall that projects out there, which was a graffiti wall. So again, another area where they can express themselves. Graffiti is something that makes anything look youthful. So having that would be quite interesting. Again, it would bring colour. It's a designated area where they could do that. So doing something like that, or the autograph wall or something like that, could certainly make the building give them more ownership. So I certainly agree with that. The screening is an interesting one. There's a couple of considerations. One is the maintenance. So planting would actually reduce the width to get a vehicle through there, and then it might push the building further into the middle. A lot of those gardens are extremely long and actually have quite a lot of trees and everything at the end already. So it might almost be that if they don't like it or they don't want to see it, then they could almost put their own vegetation along there to try and screen it. I think if we do it, it might impinge. The other thing with that as well is that you just need to be mindful that I don't want to put anything along there as part of a condition with the building, because if something goes wrong with those trees or anything like that, then obviously we don't want to get in an issue where we have to start maintaining trees. So it might be up to the residents to either see a fun building or put up their own screening along the back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'll now move on to Councillor Rhodes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Thomas and Tom. It was a really interesting presentation. I often don't like new buildings. I normally find them quite ugly, to be honest, but I really like the style of this, and I really like the shape and all the angles of it. Now, being a keen cyclist myself, I always wonder about how people don't like to get on a wet bike. So the little bike storage out the front, is there any way that it could be undercover at all?
Well, a couple of things. One is we're very mindful that I want bikes to be seen from the centre, just to stop theft, basically. That's why that's located there. So I don't want bikes tucked around anywhere, because they will start disappearing. So the location of the bike storage and that breakout area there is located there. Possibly, the only thing is that I'm very mindful that we've created this entrance and this beacon that we keep saying, and putting a cover over that would obscure the entrance slightly. well, more than slightly. So I'm not sure in that location whether we can actually get a cycle storage with anything over the top, just because it will obscure the actual building. Whether we then that canopy is quite large. Whether we look at getting some of the cycle storage under there, not sure. But yeah, that was the idea behind the location and why there isn't any cover over it at the moment.
Yeah, I do know some of the train stations, they do have a clear cover over them. So you can still see, you know, everything that's going on.
Yeah, I just think that just walking up that path there, I don't want that to be the focus, and so I'm just mindful of that any cover I think will detract from the building, and it'll be obviously have a roof that sits at sort of ceiling level, and I'm just mindful of that. You know, I take on board your comment, and whether we can put the cycle storage somewhere else and have that cover, then maybe we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Something we can look into. Now have Councillor Tandy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not sure what interjections I can make on colour, and I'm not sure whether that was a threat to council or an opportunity, but I will do my best.
Personally, really, Councillor Tandy, it was more interjection with your involvement with the original Keystone Centre.
Okay. Well, on that basis, Mr. Mayor, you'll be unsurprised to know that I'm a big fan of youth clubs, given my current role, and I think the opportunities that we have here are huge, and I don't want anything I say here to detract from that. I'm not coming in to try and be critical or churlish. I'm just what I'm going to try and do is raise a few points from the logistical realities of running a youth centre, if that's all right. So nothing I say here is meant to be a criticism of the overall scheme, which I'm fully supportive of. So a few questions. I know I apologise, Mr. Mayor, if I'm a bit disjointed, but it was the first time I've seen the presentation, so I've got about 30 post-it notes in front of me, so I will try and go through them logically. I'll start with the issue of ownership, which was mentioned on one of the early slides, and I fully agree with it. It is a youth centre will only ever be successful if it is owned by the young people and it becomes kind of theirs to have. So I agree entirely with what several councillors have said so far about the colours, and I think absolutely giving them some ownership of what this looks like eventually will be a huge factor in whether they take to it and whether they embrace it as their own. I was particularly, so on the current slide that's on the screen, that there's a very large wall kind of facing Eldon Way in front of the car park, which, you know, to me, I think is ripe for some sort of customization, shall we say, by young people, whether that is like an Allscraft wall like it's been suggested, or a mural or something like that. And I think that has potential that I would like to see developed. So I think that's got a lot of potential. In terms of the inside, I think there's lots of things that are very good about this. So let me just check. The only thing I would probably like a question about is, and I don't know whether this is probably more for officers to answer, but there's a sense that on the ground floor plan that there appears to be two entrances. So there's like a main entrance. Thank you. So at number 5, there appears to be a main entrance, which I assume is where everyone will go. But then if you go to the kind of just up and right of that, there appears to be another entrance, which does give me slight concern that we're going to end up with this being operated as a kind of 2-in-1 building, that some people go in number 5 and then someone else can hire out the rest of it going through the other building. So I'm just, it's probably not a design concept, it's not for the architects, but just I'm putting it out there that I would be a bit concerned if we were having two uses going on. I'll talk about more in probably an example would be a better place to talk about that. Secondly, could I ask about the toilets, which I know is a really random thing to talk about, but the toilets seem to be, to me, and I can only speak as someone who in my professional life regularly tries to get children out of toilets when they get angry or upset. They're very tucked away is my first impression, in terms of, dare I say, some young people, when they want to get up to no good, a toilet is a great place they would like to go to do that. And I'm just somewhat concerned that they seem to be at the very end of the building, whereas if all of the youth workers and other young people were in the hall, there's a bit of distance. Now, I don't think that's a complete issue, but maybe some kind of some measures to counter that, things like mirrors, or kind of, rather than solid walls with some gaps in so you can see through, so there's just some sense that there's oversight of the toilet area, I think would be quite important. And then the only other thing I had was the hall. I'm very pleased that the hall seems to have dividers in it, because I think there's 3 from what I can see, and I think that is going to be a hugely positive thing, because if it was one big hall, I think that could be almost quite austere. I think young people generally tend to like smaller groups where they can gather. So the division is there, and I think that's a very good thing. The only thing that I would ask for is, one of the really popular things of the current centre is the small breakout rooms that we have. So kind of rooms just off the main hall where they can go and sit perhaps in smaller groups of 4 or 5 and do their own thing, like listen to music or play video games or watch TV. And there just seems to be, they seem to be missing. That's the only thing that I'm a bit disappointed at, if I'm honest. So if that could be perhaps looked at, because that is, as I say, one of the really popular features that we get back from the young people in the current centre, is that they like having space where perhaps they're not all together, space that's close enough that they can still be supervised, but not they're completely out in the open on their own. And then the only other thing I did want to pick up on was there was a mention of a Juliet balcony on the 2nd floor above the doors, I believe, and I would just politely raise some caution, knowing young people. I have images of abseiling and the like. So if that is included, please can it be with some mitigation measures to make sure we don't have, well, how can I describe it? Rock climbing on a building. That's all I would say. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. I now have Councillor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a terrific design. It's the first time I've seen this sort of presentation, and it looks very good, and I do support it. Just 1 or 2 small questions. I wondered, what's the height of the main hall? Will it allow them to play badminton? I don't know if that's something they do already in the existing building, but it's just a query. With people walking through, using that path on the western side, I can see a lot of dog walkers probably going through there. I'm sure they probably do already, and just wondered about their senses of cleanliness, and I'll leave it at that. Also, I like that we're encouraging people to walk there, because if we have too many cars in the car park, say at the beginning or end of a session, I would worry about the numbers of people who'd be walking through when there are vehicle movements going on as well. And there was one other thing. Again, it's about the cycle storage area. You say that from, where is it, 9 on the ground floor, you know, there's oversight to the cycle storage. I didn't quite see how that would work. I wasn't sure how high the cycle storage wall is going to be. Thanks. Those are my points at this stage.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Long. Everyone back. If I just start with the cycle storage, so 9 is the staff office. So that looks through to the cycle storage, and so does the entrance, and so does the hall. The wall around the cycle storage is just a seat, so it's low, so it's not very high at all. So the idea is that there's a seat one side and then a place where you can just put your bike the other. So the idea is that it's basically it's overlooked as much as we possibly could in that area. Your other questions about the dogs, I don't know. The dog walkers we haven't really considered as a use, and if they do use it, then they tend to be early or late, so it's another form of sort of vandalism defence really. So if they do use it, perhaps that's encouraged. The height of the hall is 3 metres inside, so no, it's not big enough for badminton, and badminton is it's really a demands a sports hall height, so it's not that high. It's high enough for recreational games, ping pong and this sort of thing, and indoor. If an indoor game of indoor football broke out in there or something like that, then it would accommodate that. But badminton as an individual sport, no. I think is that all your questions? Sorry.
Yes, I think it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Councillor Price.
Thank you. A few questions, just picking up from what Councillor Tandy said about the toilets. I think rather than male female, I think that's quite old hat now. Potentially we would need gender neutral, because I know a lot of children or teenagers that potentially wouldn't want to go into a male toilet if they were transitioning or something like that. So I do think we need to look at that. And also, as Councillor Tandy said, if someone was having a bit of an issue, then they potentially would want to speak to maybe a male youth worker if a girl's got that relationship with a male youth worker, and a male youth worker wouldn't be able to go into it wouldn't be deemed correct going into a female toilet. So potentially maybe they need to be like gender neutral so that anyone can just go into the block of toilets. So that was about that. Also, would the building have air conditioning? Because I know you said about opening the Juliet balcony window, so I wasn't sure whether there was provision to have it as aircon, especially if people are sort of running around and teenagers, sort of things like that. Wasn't sure whether that was a factor. 14 spaces for the car park I think is absolutely fine, considering, as you said, about the off-street parking. I love the zebra crossing to make it safe, because it is an industrial estate and people do come round Clun Road, go down Eldon Road. It's on my way to work, so I see it, and they're zooming down, so having that zebra crossing I think is a really fantastic idea. Also, I like the play provision, that we won't be losing the play park, and I'm not sure whether it's for now or for exempt of who will then deal with the play park to put all the equipment back there, so you might not be able to answer that. And on your plan, the BMX track as it stands at the moment is sort of fenced off. On your plan it says an open area, so potentially would it be an open area, or would it still be sort of half fenced off? And I think that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. If I just do your questions in reverse, if that's right.
Yep.
A BMX track, I'm not sure. Again, I think fencing's good because it highlights where one activity ends and another one starts. I don't think the fencing at the moment is sort of like a picket fence, isn't it? So you can sort of see through it. So maybe something similar where you can continue the division, but obviously, it's overlooked, because I think, a BMX track is, for the user is fun, and it'd be a shame if no one knew it was there. So I think having it open yet divided, sort of as it currently is, would be good. The play park, I can't answer that, I'm afraid. That's I'm just not sure who looks after that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure, thanks.
In terms of heating and cooling this building, it's sort of a similar question to the sustainability. We need to advance it more. The only thing I'll say is that we've done similar buildings before, the issue is that at one time you might have one person in that hall, at another time you might have 30, and you need sustainability, from a MHVR or any sort of heating system where you know, it's reused is great, but it simply isn't aggressive enough. And so we tend to lean on air conditioning, which is just so responsive. It's not a very sustainable answer. The rest of the building can obviously, you know, use other sources, but certainly where there's going to be sometimes a lot of people and then not, you really need something that's responsive and aggressive with that. So it probably will be air conditioning, but as this scheme develops past planning, and we, you know, the designer looks at, you know, the detailed design, then, you know, an M&E consultant will need to be appointed, which looks at, you know, all these things, because obviously you don't want the building to get too hot from, you know, glazing and so on. So there needs to sort of be a separate consultant who looks at all these things and makes the building super efficient. Is that all your questions? Sorry, is that?
Yeah, it was just about the toilets as well, but that's fine. We obviously, it's not down to the final.
Yeah, no, I think again with the toilets. So yeah, you know, always developing. We put more in there. How they're divided up, you know, gender neutral and disabled. You know, it needs constant reviewing. I also take on board a previous question. That actually, you know, perhaps there needs to be a bit more space around them, and I understand that. I think the corridor that leads to them and to the disabled toilet, you know, if that was widened, you know, that sort of thing would help, I'm sure. So I think with the toilets, it's ever evolving, and you know, we have the space to put, you know, them in. So it's just how they're divvied up. But as the design develops, that will have more consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I now have Juliet Harris just wants to step in briefly, I believe.
Happy to give way to Councillor North East.
Oh, sorry, I was just trying to type that, but it didn't come in. Councillor North East, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Freddie, being part of the old Keystone Centre, we've got quite a lot of experience with regards to the running of the facility as a youth club, and I concur with what the comments that Freddie made. I think the biggest thing that comes out of this is the ownership of the building, and for this area it is paramount, and I'll say that again, it's paramount for the success of this place that the kids actually feel that they own the building. It just won't work if it's too structured. They've got to feel that the building is theirs and they can use it more or less as they please, but under the rules of the youth workers that are there. I do like the way that the hall has been divided off now. I think that is a big improvement, because it wouldn't have been used as a big hall. As Freddie said, the youngsters like smaller areas to chill out in. They like to have a TV room, they like to have a games room, they like to have a music room, and that's what they want to do when they come to a youth club now. It's not all about table tennis and pool tables. They want to do a lot more relaxation things, and I think the hall now lends itself to that. And as for the storage, I'm glad to see a lot more storage, because you can never have too much storage in one of these places, I can assure you. I've got a few questions, if I can just pose them. We've been talking about the toilets. What is going to be the capacity of this building? Because the capacity of the building will determine the amount of toilets you need, surely. Do you want to answer that one, and I'll come on to the next one?
Yeah. I mean, the capacity of the building, I don't know. I mean, if you know, that hall can hold, you know, 30, 40 people, and the rooms above, you know, there can be, you know, 10 people in the big one and 5 in the small one. So, you know, there could be, you know, a real push. There could be 50 people, but I don't know if you're going to use it like that. So it probably won't be, you know, that instances. So I think it's, you know, probably a question, maybe not for me, and a return to the brief and just see how many people are actually going to use this building. And I don't know is the answer.
Yeah, I just thought that you'd have run a sort of ballpark figure to determine how many toilets you're going to have in there. The possibility about the people will be using it. That was the only thing.
It's been generated off similar buildings that we've done before, where we've obviously developed the design past this stage, and then there's further consultation on who's using it and the amount of toilets and the type of toilets. So that's previously how we've done it, and obviously there's a space allowance for that.
Yeah, we need to know that obviously before we finally build, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think even before any planning application has been submitted, there needs to be a further development of the brief just to outline, how this building is going to be used, because obviously the brief originally said what we want. We then presented the building, which has said, this is your building, and then how that's going to be used. Then the question sort of comes back out a little bit. So obviously there needs to be a much more dialogue prior to planning. Not only about the toilets, but there's other areas as well, some of these breakout spaces, some of these subdivisions, and how it's used. I think personally that are all up for grabs, really. The concept design is purpose is obviously generate questions and conversation, and I think some of the questions today are really quite valid, and also it's interesting that some are repeating, particularly the toilets. So that certainly makes my ears prick up that actually something's not quite right with the toilets, and we need to investigate that further. So and obviously if we go to later stages, we'll certainly do that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, looking at the design now, I'm pleased to see more toilets, but they're a little way away from the main hall, where the youth facility is, and that just concerns me a little bit, because as Freddie said, kids will go out of sight and into the toilets there, away from where the workers are. It would have been nice if the toilets were nearer to the main hall, so there wasn't that gap between. The other thing is
that has already been noted, Councillor North East.
Yeah, the other thing is in that area, could the stairs be closed off? Because it's another situation again where you can lose kids up the stairs and then they'll be on the top floor.
I mean, yeah, anything can be closed off. It's again, it goes back to aesthetically. As architects, I'd like a lovely grand stair there that leads upstairs to a lovely vaulted area, which creates space, light, and fun. I do appreciate we're designing a building for use, so that there might need to be some compromise on that. So. Again, Councillor North is just a bit more developed design, and we could look at that. But I just want to be mindful that we don't strip too. That it has to be safe. I get that, but it has to be a fun building, and it has to have interest, because I think that goes back to ownership. So I think we need to keep in as much as we can.
Yeah, sure. Couldn't agree with you more. The mugger. There doesn't seem provision for one on this plan again, and I think it's something that is really needed. It's something that's well used over the road, and it's certainly we need one on this site here. And one of the areas I think where it could be used is on 13, the outside space area that you've got there. It needs to be close to the building, so that it can be policed is the wrong word, but at least overseen by youth workers from the main building. And also put it next to the main building, you could easily then light it with floodlights off of the building rather than putting up poles with floodlights on. So that would make it a cheaper option there. But in putting it there as well, I think the houses along Clun Road would need some sort of acoustic barrier. They've been subject to an open space before with nothing at the end of it, and now we're going to put a youth facility there, and rightly so. The kids will be making noise. I mean, that's what they go there to do, enjoy themselves. But I wouldn't want to upset the residents in Clun Road for the sake of an acoustic fence, and I think that's something we should be looking at along there. The other thing is. How much the solar panels that you say you're going to put on there, How much energy will that provide for the overall running of the building?
I can only talk about similar buildings, but some of the ones we've done, certainly on residential, are self-sufficient, so they will provide enough power for that building, particularly
So
if it's used certain times of the day.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, well, it depends, but that's what we've tried to do, so that we try to get as much as we can on. Obviously, there's an aesthetic thing here, that the more of that solar we put on, arguably the building's going to look better or worse with it. And so there is a crossover. But you know, if we get this right from an efficiency point of view, in that we make these walls super insulated, we get our heating and cooling right, and then we've got our solar, then the building, you know, should be self-sufficient. And also it's another sort of education tool, you know, with the children who use it. It's sort of quite a fascinating process, and actually, you know, to have a building like that is quite an advert. So you know, that's something we're obviously very keen, and that's, you know, goes back to the orientation. So yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, I mean, my only reason for asking is it's their biggest outlay over the road. And we're forever chasing heating bills and energy bills. If it could be self-sufficient, and are you saying then that the heating could even be run off of electricity rather than a gas system?
Well, a couple of things. So obviously, if we do air conditioning, then that's one system. If we do a ground source heat pump, that's another. So it's really where we get the energy from and how we transfer that and how we use it. So yeah, I mean, we'll do what, you know, electric heating. If you didn't have solar, is obviously extremely expensive to run. So unless we get it right, I certainly wouldn't drift down the electric route, you know. But you know, if we get the solar right, and this goes back to the M&E consultant, which I've previously touched on, then you know, the building should be super efficient and you know, so look after itself.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Juliet Harris, you wanted to respond to some of the questions?
Just very quickly, Chair, not so much respond as to thank members for all of their comments, really. I've got pages of notes which are all very, very useful, and to make the point really that everything that's been said over and above the architectural questions, which Tom has been able to answer hopefully for you all, it's how to make the building work is really part of the more detailed work that will be happening next. That's the best way I can sum up where we are at the moment, and to assure members that those comments that they have made have been noted and will be taken forward in that way. Secondly, to address the questions about what happens to the outside space, and going forward, we're in partnership with the District Council on this particular project. The outside space is their responsibility, and they will be taking forward plans to develop that as part of this scheme. So again, all of those comments are noted, particularly what the current youth facility is on the other side of the road, and the multi-use game area, the MUGA that Councillor North East referred to. All of that is noted and will be taken forward for them when they look at their plans for the outside space provision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Juliet. That's conclusion of the question and answer. Peter, should we take that as a summary as well, or do you have a greater summary? No.
I've certainly got no greater summary than what was just happened, Mr. Mayor, and I'm sure we can pick up in the second part of this in exempt.
That's what I thought. I just thought I better double check. It is recommended that now move on to exempt business. It is recommended that the public and accredited representatives of the press be excluded from the meeting under Section 100 Local Government Act 1972 due to the confidential nature of the business to be conducted. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, David.
Thank you. All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes, agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Thomas and Tom for joining us this evening, and I will bring this part of the meeting to a close at 7:55.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tom and Tom.
Thank you.
Members will now adjourn the meeting for a period of up to 10 minutes. So please turn off your cameras and mute the microphones and remain online and rejoin the meeting in approximately 10 minutes.
I thought we were going to a different meeting.
You are going to a different
Yeah.
meeting, councillors. So thank you, Tom and Tom, and we'll get back to you tomorrow in one form or other. Just give you a bit of feedback. And councillors, in 10 minutes' time, if you could rejoin us on the other link that you've been sent, which is